Hi, welcome to QuickLearn Office Hours, where QuickLearn training staff answers student questions. I'm Nick Howenstein. I'm an instructor in BizTalk Server, Team Foundation Server, as well as Azure Logic Apps. So let's go ahead and get to the question for today, which comes from Larry, who's actually taken quite a few of our BizTalk classes over the years. And basically, he wrote earlier this week and says, we have a client that is sending an N3 segment. So, of course, we're dealing with X12 transaction set here. And within there, there's an N3 segment. Basically, it's going to be mentioning an address, so a mailing address, and giving 2 lines of that. Usually, the different lines of that address would be separated by a little star or a little asterisk character there. But the client's sending it as N3 star 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 do not mail star star star. And then we have the segment terminator, a little tilde there, which causes the message to just die. We don't even get an ACK. Yes, the sender should be editing their transaction, but they're not, and obviously are expecting us to. Lovely. We've been told that this bad segment causes a problem in the EDI disassembler, and there are no hooks there to send a message about the problem. Consequently, when this file is sent to BizTalk, we don't know that it didn't make it to the other side. All right, so in this case, looks like we have an issue which we might be able to address with failed message routing. So let's take a look at how we might address that. So in this case, because we're dealing with failures upon receipt of the message, we would go to the receive port that has the receive location with the EDI disassemble pipeline, so where we're actually doing the raw parsing of the X12 interchange. And from there, you can actually check the box to enable failed message routing. So it's in the receive port properties, you'll have that checkbox. Now, whenever you do that, you'll notice that basically any failures that occur are going to result in a message being published to the message box that has a bunch of properties promoted with the error report namespace. So you'll see error report description, error report error type, error report.failure code, message type, etc. And basically you can then build a subscriber for those failed messages based off of those properties. Now, some of the properties will be just written in the context as well, so they're there, but they're not necessarily promoted for the purpose of routing. And so you'll find a few of those properties promoted, a few of those just written in the context. All other properties that were there, like the original everything else, are pretty much just going to be written, so they're not going to be available for routing. Now, if that's already enabled and you're still not seeing any output, you could be in a situation where basically you have a greedy subscription that's just kind of eating all those messages. So let's go inside of BizTalk Server and see what that actually looks like to do. Okay, so here we are in the land of BizTalk Server within the BizTalk Server Administration Console. I took a little bit of time to basically put together something that's trying to replicate what you're seeing. And basically I have a receive port called test_in here that's going to be receiving the messages through a receive location called test_in file that basically has the EDI receive pipeline configured and is listening to, as we can see there, is listening to a file location for any file with copy in the title. So as X12 interchanges are dropped there with copy in the title, it'll basically do some simple translation of that to XML. And then I have a send port subscribing to any of the files that basically come through that receive port, and we'll send those out. And so I have a sample perfectly valid interchange here gathered from the internet. It's amazing what you'll find out there in terms of sample data. I'm going to go ahead and grab that and toss that into basically what amounts to the receive location, and we'll see that we get a bunch of stuff out. Now, some of this is message data, so the data that was actually in the message, but I also have acknowledgements configured, so I should get a technical acknowledgement, my TA1, as well as my 999, so I'm getting both of my acknowledgements out of this. Now, in this case, AK901 is an A, so it's perfectly acceptable, everything's great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kill off those, so my sample valid document does work. I also have a sample document that's not as valid, and in this case it has exactly that same error that you were seeing, which we'll just go ahead and search for here. So there's a few, there it is. There's a few valid addresses, and then right about there is one that's not valid at all. All right, so basically screams do not mail, and has all the stars around it which would typically be separators for my different data elements. All right, so that's a problem. Now, if I submit that, what I'll find is that I can replicate part of your problem, but not the other part. All right, so part of your problem I can replicate is that in this case, I'm not going to have any indication that the failure occurred on this side. Of course, as I look inside of the BizTalk server group hub, I will see something there. And I'll also kind of replicate why you might not be seeing something there. But as far as the acknowledgements are concerned, I am getting the ACKs. All right, so I got the technical acknowledgement, interchange, header, all that fun stuff is good. But then I got a bunch of information about how broken and wrong everything else was in terms of the actual transaction sets inside. And of course, that was a reject for us, so I wasn't too happy. All right, so I am getting acknowledgements there. I can't account for that part of it. However, inside BizTalk server, if I go to the BizTalk server group hub and refresh, I'll see that effectively at the moment I have 6 resumable instances. I have some messages that are basically failed entirely. All right, so if I look at the reason for that, we can kind of see what that is, and we'll see some problems with the N301 and the N302, because remember, it was basically star, 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 and it's expecting values to be after the first star, a value to be there, and of course they're blank. So it's complaining about that, and that's kind of what we would expect. Now, if we were to enable failed message routing, so we could get this information routable, I could actually know that that failure's occurred and have a notification of it, get something out of BizTalk server to notify me of that. What that would be is it would be going to the receive port itself and checking that box. All right, so if I do that, I'm just going to blindly terminate this, given that there was just sample data and we were testing it anyway. All right, so clean out our message box there. Everything looks wonderful. All right, so I'm going to submit that again. My lovely invalid message. It is so broken. And I get my acknowledgements out, and my acknowledgements are happy. They're just telling me sad stories, all right? So the acknowledgement worked, but it's a reject. And if I look inside BizTalk server and I refresh, it would appear that there's nothing there. So I'm imagining this is actually probably closer to what you're seeing. All right, now in this case, I enabled failed message routing. BizTalk server published a message. And that message was basically a failure report, but there is already a subscription somewhere within BizTalk server picking that up. Now, subscriptions are pretty easily discovered through the new query window. If I want to go out and query for active subscriptions, I'll end up seeing all of those wonderful subscriptions out there, specifically activation subscriptions. If I got a bunch of running instances, I'm using correlation a lot, this can get really noisy. But in this case, there's not a lot of noise. It's basically a lot of stuff from ESB. And one of those that might be causing me a little bit of issue is going to be within ESB. All right, and that's going to be the very top one here from that, which is the all.exceptions subscription. And basically it says if the error report.failure code property exists, or a fault code exists on the message, or it's coming for, I have a message destined for some specific send port by ID. In other words, it's directly statically bound to that send port rather. Then we want the message. And so this first one is pretty greedy. It says if there's an error report, now this is from BizTalk, not specific to ESB. The next one is specific to ESB. So if I'm using failed message routing and there's a failure code, take the message. Now, if we're taking the message there, if we're subscribing to it basically over in this application, because the message hit the message box, doesn't matter which application it came from. As long as there's a failure code, the second the message hits the message box, it's subscribed to there. There's nothing suspended because everything routed successfully. So you might have a pretty greedy subscription on some send port out there. Now, stopping it won't do enough. So even if you stopped it, you'd have that message waiting to go out. So we'd want to unenlist that if I actually wanted to see this message get stuck and be able to examine what properties I have for routing. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get that message stuck. So I'm going to unenlist that. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to full stop the ESB because I'm not even using it at the moment for this little demo app that we put together. All right, so from there, with the kind of over greedy, all exception subscription disabled, I'm going to go ahead and pass in that invalid message once again. I'll get my acknowledgements out of this, but then in the group hub, I should, let me close all those windows and refresh. I should get a message, or in this case quite a few, that are not resumable. And that's good. This is our failure report, because what we're expecting to have happened is that it will have published, or at least attempted to publish, an error report about the failure, which will show up in the context. Of course, the message body is still the message body. And so we'll see a few of those. And we're not really subscribed to those, so it should be a routing failure. And so what we'll find that we have to route on are all of these promoted properties. And so what I have is a few properties promoted that are, if I look at the namespace, let's go ahead and pull that up. Whoops. Sort by promoted again. All of these properties are actually promoted in the error report namespace. So we would expect that anything that came through the receive port, got published to the message box, ends up sending out to the file location with happy in the title. But these messages didn't, because the receive port name property is actually the one from the error report namespace. So I still have that available. I could look for error report.receivePortName equals test in, and I could look at, actually I could just leave it at that. If there's a failure coming from that receive port, accept it. Now we could also look at the error type. It's a failed message. I could look at the failure code specifically, and I could actually handle a few different types of failures in different ways and get those routed out differently. Ultimately, though, the message body itself that's going to be coming through will be the message that had failed. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and terminate those for now. And I'm going to come set up a new subscription for that send port. So I have a lovely send port here called error out that's unenlisted. I kind of set that up so at least I have the transport properties in there. But the filters are blank. And so here I'm going to go ahead and set up a new filter, and it's going to be error report dot, and then I'll click in there and get the receive port name. And I'll say that if it comes in through our test in receive port, we want to kind of subscribe to that and have that routed out. All right, and at that point, I think that should be sufficient. I'll go ahead and start that up, and I'm going to start up the ESB as well. Now, it's going to end up still with that really extra super greedy subscription for all the errors ever, and yes, it will hear about this error, but it's up to whoever manages that application to deal with that, and they get to deal with all my noise that I'm generating, and they'll have to make their subscription work a little bit better. All right, probably not the right attitude to have, but that's what I'm going to go with. All right, so I'll delete those, and I'm going to take and send my invalid message once again, and I'll find that now I get two happy messages, basically telling me all about the status of the interchange as a whole, as well as any processing failures on the transaction sets. And then I get a lovely XML representation of the pieces that had failed to process. All right, so we get all those lovely error messages. And again, it's just the raw contents there. It's not necessarily going to be a description of what the problem is. It's the message that caused the problem is what I'll get. So if I wanted to handle this through an automated process, beyond just sending out a notification that there were problems, we can certainly do that. But it looks like the reason that you're not seeing anything out there in the group hub when you look is you do probably have failed message routing enabled, and you do probably have something that is subscribing to those failed messages so that you don't see anything. As far as the acknowledgements, I would check the configuration of the parties, or basically the agreement between those parties, and see that you have enabled acknowledgements, both your technical acknowledgements and your functional acknowledgements. In this case, it would be a functional acknowledgement that would show the rejection. So depending on, it could be a 997, could be a 999, depending on how you've configured things that you might be seeing. In my case, I was sending out my acknowledgements were basically 999s. But that's configurable depending on what you need. I hope this video has increased your understanding. If you want to learn more about BizTalk Server, see some of our other QuickLearn Training Office Hours videos. Otherwise, for a more formal training, attend one of our instructor-led courses. I'm Nick Howenstein, and I'll see you next time on QuickLearn Office Hours.